Hello there, welcome back. Now I'm going to go on to the two films in the biblical setting, which is A Great Story Ever Told and Noah. So one was an old film and one's a new film, or newish. So biblical epics are a kind of weird genre that they were big for like 10 years in the 50s and the early 60s. They were like films that can make a lot of money. I mean, there's always been films with religion throughout time in the cinema, and they always have a peak, then they fall away for a while, and then they come back up and fall away. It's one of those things. People who have religious beliefs like to see that that's the thing in the cinema, but I don't think they always need to see it. I think it's one of those things is like you can see it and then see other kind of films. So I think it's one of those things that like, people think religious people are going to watch these all the time and watch the bad ones. It's like no, they won't. They'll just watch the ones they think are good. That's it. So they come and go. So you get some big hits, and you have like any genre, you have like bombs of films that no one wants to see, and then it falls away, and it stops and starts and stops and starts. Now I'm going to be doing some more of these films. I've already watched 2 films about Moses, which will be coming next week. But this these 2 are like one's about Jesus and one's about Noah. Just like last time, I had one about Jesus and one about the Bible in the beginning, which also included Noah. So this is almost like a sequel to that video, except in this time the films aren't as good. It's the best way I can put it possibly. I would much happier rewatch King of Kings and the Bible in the beginning than either of these 2 films. I mean, Noah's the better of the 2 because it is shorter and it is insane. Well, and it's got lots of visual stuff that's quite cool, but it has lots of issues. The Greatest Story Ever Told is, well, it's an epic, and at its most epic, in the sense of it's trying to be a serious film about religion, but it's made by a Hollywood studio with massive budget, and it means you have to bring in some big stars to have small parts, like John Wayne turns up as Centurion later in the film, Shelley Winters turns up, Telly Savalas turns up as Pontius Pilate. You know, he's miscast as hell in that film. All the big names they bring in for a few minutes of miscast, but at least Telly Savalas has some fun with it. I mean, he's the most enjoyable person in the film, even though he's miscast and he's in it for like 20 minutes. They have other big stars like Charlton Heston, who was in tons of these films, and he's John the Baptist, and he's completely miscast. And it's like you can't cast Moses as John the Baptist. Come on, it's like it just feels odd. But this film stars Max von Sydow as a Jesus, and it has a bunch of actors playing different parts. If Sal Mineo was one of the followers as well, he's quite good as one of the guys who has a disability that Jesus solves and heals him. You've got like various disciples that turn up. Obviously, the best partner that's Judas, played with David McCallum. I mean, Judas is one of those parts that's like it's the best part in any Jesus movie. It's like the one. It's like yeah, you're gonna die in the end, but it's the best part. It's the one where you don't have to do all the speeches. You just have to be an interesting character actor, and you steal the film. I mean, Rip Torn and King of Kings was one of the most interesting characters in that film. Last Temptation of Christ, Harvey Keitel, one of the most interesting characters in that film. This one, Dave McCallum, even though he's downplayed a lot more than this one, still one of the best parts of the film because he's like, it's like you understand his pain and disappointment and the fact that he's self-hating and he can't quite cross over to believe the same as the others do in this, what Jesus says. And it's like, it's a really interesting character. And it's like, I'd like to see more of this and less of a lot of the other stuff. And the problem is, I've seen this just after King of Kings, and King of Kings is a lot of stuff about the historical problems within that kingdom during the time of Jesus. And this one, there's less of that, and it's much more about the biblical speeches. And it tends to make Jesus look a bit smug. the way they shoot it, because this is a very pious film. It's like, in no way can you say anything bad about Jesus in this film, but the way it's portrayed, and King of Kings, Jesus is a much more approachable figure. The way it's played, this one he's more distant. He's almost like he's telling basically telling you stories to give you information, but it feels like it's coming from on high in a way that other Jesuses can be more. He can feel more human to you, and I can see the point. In this one, it's a bit distant. So Max von Sydow playing him, and von Sydow, obviously a great Swedish actor. He's doing English, not his first language, but he's a good actor and he can do it. But the problem is, one, he's too much makeup on to make him look the way they want him. So there's weirdly lots of eyeliner. And his voice sounds very similar to the voice von Sydow used in Ming the Merciless in Flash Gordon. And the eyeliner looks a bit like Ming the Merciless. So every so often I was seeing Ming the Merciless saying Jesus lines in my head. So it took me out quite a few times. But there was some stuff in there that it was like, the way it was directed, it was like, there's a more human way to get us across that they're not taking. It's almost like, we will speechify to you. And it makes you more distance from the Jesus interpretation in this film. So it creates a kind of distance, so it means the film feels longer because you're not really with the character as much as you should be. Which is funny because in King of Kings, they actually had a distance from Jesus where you saw a lot of miracles take place from the point of view of other characters. And it was done very interestingly. So you weren't trying to make you understand them. But you understand a lot more you do in this film, where there's a lot more Jesus in it, but he's more distance to you. Just the way it's played, it just feels cold a lot of the time. Like, here's a guy who can tell you exactly what you should do with your life, but can't have a simple conversation. It's that kind of feeling of the character in this one. And I think because there's been plenty of interpretations of Jesus through the years that haven't been like that, it makes it jump out more, because it's like, I'm kind of alienated from this version of Jesus, and it just doesn't work for me. And he doesn't feel like he is the human saying he's a guy who's going to bring the kingdom of God to the world and things. And you don't feel that. You just feel like he's a guy making speeches. And the Sermon on the Mount is nowhere near as good as the version of King of Kings. It's just nowhere near as good. And the big problem they have is they shoot a lot at Monument Valley, which is they're trying to suggest the kind of harsh conditions of the Middle East during the time, rather than shooting the Middle East, where at least we're getting some greenery, and you can see it's tough, but there's watering holes and there's things, and we can work the land, and it's difficult, but we got to get through it. This is Monument Valley, which is basically Death Valley, where there's just nothing there. So it's like, well, how do people live here and not die? And you just get a sense of they've created a visual style that isn't very satisfying, because you don't believe in the place as an actual place where people can live and work. It just feels like a place where they've shot a film. It's like an outdoor film set. And there's lots of places you've seen in countless other films. So no matter how inventive their angles have got, it doesn't quite work. And the film just has that sense of it's not quite coming together. It's like they've done all this research, but forgot to work out how to make a film. Even worse is Charlton Heston as John the Baptist. John the Baptist is a very annoying character in this film, because he is so smug. He's so smug about he's going to enter the kingdom of heaven, and the rest of people won't. And it's like, wow, this is like, it's like tone it down. And it's part of the miscast of the actor, because Charlton Heston doesn't play, in these epics, he doesn't play quiet. And it's also just the stuff he's asked to say and the way he's directed. It just feels like this character who in King of Kings, played by Robert Ryan, was a very human character. And you can see the humanity and why he was doing things. And this one is just this character who's seems to be very vain, and it's like, again, that's the problem with the film, is a lot of the kind of characters you're meant to like, you're meant to respect, do feel they feel distance and very impressed with themselves, including the Jesus character in this film, which is wrong for how you do this character, how you do Jesus represent him on the screen. It's just not how you do it. So the film is alienating. So basically, the most interesting stuff is with the Romans and with the different Jewish leaders in the area. That's where you're like, oh, please go back to them. They're more interesting. Or if we go to the Jesus character in this, I'm going with the Jesus character because he doesn't really feel like he feels like a character in a film rather than anything you can imagine from reading the Bible. Really, ultimately, you always want to go to Judas with those scenes because he's more interesting. And you've got a great actor playing Jesus, and it's still not working. This film came out and did not do well. It was a massive bomb, and the critics were not nice to it. And I can see why. It just literally is one of those films. It looks very nice, but they have not worked out the human side of the story. It goes on for way too long. The place said, "Oh, Ten Commandments went on for 4 hours. We can do that," and it's like, yeah, but Ten Commandments actually had some fun in it. It wasn't all lecturing, and it had humanity in it, even if it's very kind of garish Hollywood version of it. This one is pretty dull, and it really is. It's just misbalanced. It's a misbalanced film, and no one quite knows what they're going for. And it's a film with lots of directors shooting bits of it because of film way over budget and way over schedule. And it used to have said that they never figured out what the film was before they started. They never figured it out. Like, this is how it's going to go. This is how the impact of these scenes are going to land, in contrast to these other scenes to create a build. Like, in King of Kings also there's a point of view of who Jesus was and why the story is important, why they're telling these parts of the story and leave other bits out. Next thing is just like, we need to cover this, cover Lazarus, cover this, cover that. And it becomes this thing of you're covering so much, there's no point of view. And you can't get invested in it. And when you get to the end, and they're going back and forth from the Romans to the various leaders, local leaders, about how to deal with Jesus, it's just like scenes happening rather than any emotional investment. So when you get to the end and where Jesus is meant to redeem humankind, you don't feel anything. It's just like, okay, there's a character getting crucified. It's not really what it's meant to do. So yes, this is a film that has not aged well at all. It's a complete misfire. It was a misfire when it was released, and it's not a film that can be. Some films people don't get when they're released, and they're looked upon better with time. I mean, King of Kings had that element. This one was the exact opposite. It's just so smug. Now, Noah's a much more fun film. Noah is crazy, and it's knowingly crazy. It understands we're doing interpretation of Noah. We're leaving stuff out. We're putting stuff in from different sources. We're adjusting things so Noah's not this elderly figure who is paternal and is a font of wisdom all the time. No, he's a guy who's struggling with God. So it's very influenced by The Last Temptation of Christ, which is a Jesus struggling with God. Here is Noah struggling with God. I mean, Last Temptation of Christ hangs over this film a lot. And it's a weird thing to see in this film because it does feel like it's indebted to another film. And it's directed by Darren Aronofsky, and it has what I found is flaws in his films generally, as the pacing is stop-start, at least for me. He's not great at character development in the sense that he starts things and he leaves it and then he develops in an odd way, and if a lot of things don't seem to connect in a way that is emotionally satisfying, doesn't mean you have to do things that are traditional or do the easy, normal way to do it. But you have to, but he seems to, it doesn't feel like he's trying a alternative way to do it. It feels much more like he doesn't understand how to do it sometimes. And that kind of just comes across in his films for me. It's also the actors, you feel he never gets the best out of actors either, because it feels like he likes a certain theatricality that's maybe a bit old fashioned, and it just feels false to me. So I look at all these actors who are doing their best, but you always feel like there's a personality that's more naturalistic that isn't being used. And it's just clunky in development. And in the actual, some of the dialogue given to the actors doesn't feel like it's been tested by people to see, would he say this? Was this the best way for him to express this? A lot of time it just feels old fashioned and clunky. And it's almost telling you the theme of the film when it really wants to be a silent film. And it's just a frustrating film in lots of ways because of that. It's like there's so much good stuff in it, but then the dialogue is clunky, and it just seems to like make the actors find it difficult, because it's a lot of time they're saying things they could do in a look that would be more effective in a look, or like half a mumbled line would tell you a lot more than anything having a big speech about it. And Aronofsky doesn't seem to know how to do that. He just, every time I've seen his film, I always feel that they're overwritten and they're telling stuff you don't need to know that they should be implied in the storytelling. Like he needs to, some films need to spend time in the editing room. I think he needs to spend more time going through the draft before he gets to his draft and then starts shooting it. I just feel he needs a brutal cut of the script before he goes on set. And it's just, that's the thing. It just sort of undoes this film in lots of ways, even though it's lots of interesting things. Because it does go back to Noah's time and the idea of these creatures who have basically the descendants of Adam and Eve from Eden. The people who live a long time, and they are from one bloodline of Seth. The descendants of Cain are spread out throughout the world, and they're causing all the problems. And these other descendants are the good people, and they've been wiped out by the evil. And God's had enough of it. He's going to flood the whole world. So he asked Noah to make the ark, bring 2 of each animal onto the ark. And that's interesting how they do it. It's like, it's very practical. It's like, okay, we need to find some chemicals to keep these animals asleep, otherwise we're going to have a riot. You know, there's the tactical thing of building it. They actually help from these creatures who are basically fallen angels who have been turned into stone because they've rebelled against God, and they have to live a life of penance on the earth where they're getting hunted down by the humans. And this is a chance of redemption to help Noah build this ark and actually save the animals. And there's things like that are wonderful. There's Anthony Hopkins as Noah's grandfather, who's has his own demons, and he's obsessed with berries, idea of berries, and he's managed to live way too long. All that stuff's interesting. The idea of the 3 sons of Noah, and they've all got all the different problems. The oldest one is fine. He's got a woman who's barren, but she loves him. Another 2, they're going to go in the ark without any mate, and that's going to kill everybody. So it's like, well, what do we get? What happens to us? And there's just lots of things like that are going on, of familial things that are interesting. But then the film just doesn't really go along with its own development, really. It's like, okay, now we have to have these characters who are the personification of the people who have gone wrong, and it shows the idea of them running out of resources and they're killing each other and doing cannibalism and all that sort of stuff, which is powerful, but there's too much of it, and there's too much dialogue between Noah and Ray Winston's character, who's the leader of them. And that kind of gets in the way of the dynamics between the family, and everything's just crashed together in odd ways, and it's it's just very bitty, the film, because it's like scenes are developed and then they fall away for a bit, and then they're brought back up and they fall away for a bit. And it's kind of awkward how they're intercut, really. And it just feels like it's a film that hasn't been finished in the writing phase, unfinessed. And then every time you go back, you have to have the explanation to get you back up to speed. And it's like, Jesus Christ, get to the point. And there's that frustration in the film. And there's a whole thing towards the end where Noah has to decide whether humanity should live or die, because his once barren, it's not his daughter, but some girl he saved, which is barren, and then suddenly she can give birth. She's going to give birth to a baby, and it's like, if it's a girl, that means they'll give his son's mates, but it also means Noah's determined that God's telling him humanity must fall. And the whole idea ultimately is that, no, it's his choice. Should humanity return with animals, or should they fall? Knowing all the problems of humanity, knowing all those sins within him and his family as well. That's a great theme that's only brought up late in the film, and it's like, that should have been like halfway through the film. It should have been something that should be stated, and then you see the characters interact, and you have to try and, through their interactions, figure out what you think. And it's like left to the end, and it's like, it's just very unsatisfying. It's like, I mean, it's just like the way the full film's written. It's like, I'm really excited by the weird parts. The director's like, I'm really excited by the weird parts and the different angels and the ark and all this other stuff. But let's throw in this other stuff, like Ray Winston on the ark, and he's there for most of the journey, and it's like, which is just a suspense beat that's not that interesting, which takes away from the suspense beat of, will Noah kill his own grandchildren because he's gone a bit mad, which is really interesting. But it's not giving the space to the Ray Winston story as well, and it's like, the stories are clashing all the time. Neither one really gets the full emphasis it's required. You feel you're losing stuff constantly to make sure both things are in play. And that happens throughout the film, with a sense of that you should have one story focusing it, and everything else, the theme should go around that one story. Instead, there's always different stories going here, here, here. Even within what's a very simple story, it always feels there's scenes of things that are brought up, then kind of developed awkwardly, then interact with other stories in a really pedestrian way. And you just leave, and by the end, they've kind of told the story, but it's like, ultimately the film just doesn't feel very satisfying, because you've been told in such a kind of half-assed way. Basically, it's like, how did the script get through? How did they not go back and rewrite some of it? I think because they thought maybe it was edgy or something. The way Aronofsky was writing it, and they thought maybe it read edgier than it actually was. But it just feels kind of like you're told obvious things, and these poor actors have to see these obvious lines, like what you get in the biblical epics of old. It's not as bad as some of that stuff, but it still is that feeling of, no one would say this, and the actors know it, and actors are looking awkward saying it. And Russell Crowe's giving it his all, and he's trying his best, but a lot of the time he's giving duff dialogue. Jennifer Connelly's his wife, same thing. She's trying her best. She's getting some terrible dialogue too. Every actor gets a couple of scenes of terrible dialogue. I mean, the worst offender is Emma Watson as the girl who was brought up by Noah, who's the worst thing in the film by a mile, and which is a real problem. She has to make the point at the end to Noah, but it was his choice rather than something from God. And she kills it in the wrong way. She kills it most of the scene because she's not good in the film. And is it just me, or does most of the leads in the Harry Potter films are emotionally constipated when they act on camera? So that's what it feels like, and it doesn't feel like a human being saying these lines. It feels like a robot or someone who's terrified of emoting at all. And it's just like, this should have been the height of the movie, instead of just this someone talking down to you. And it just becomes a very annoying scene. And just the film feels like that. It just feels kind of pretentious, and it thinks it's been clever, and there's lots of fun things in it, a lot of interesting things, but it hasn't done the work in the script, the final script, to make everything cohere. So in those problems, the script cannot be solved by great production design or actors doing their best. They're still going to be there, and they're still going to be awkward. And they're still going to make the film feel very bitty and jagged in a bad way, in a sense of like you've always got these big time jumps that can be annoying because they're not very specific, but also it's just the story's not being told very well. There's no just the way the jumps come on time just feel like it's done very awkwardly, and it's not very good storytelling wise. And it's trying to do an epic story and an intimate story at the same time, and there's a tension between these that the film doesn't have a clue how to deal with. I mean, it's not just like it fails; it fails spectacularly at it. So the film becomes more interesting as a film that's kind of a disaster, but very fascinating how all the ideas, because you can see there's a good film in there somewhere. Just needs a bit of recasting, a rewrite, you know, some experienced producer helping the director bring his vision together into something that would really work. It just feels like a missed opportunity because it's like you let this guy cast whoever he wanted and let him do all these crazy things, and no one was watching over saying, maybe we should try some sanity in some of these places. So it's just a weird film. It's just frustrating because I really want to like it, and it doesn't let me like it. So that's Noah. I don't want to go any further because I feel I'm just going to repeat myself even more. So hope you enjoyed this video. That's me for now. Bye.